Alrighty. Roll and release week 2. Brett's with us tonight as our little, what we say, our little guinea pig. I'll just wait a few seconds so we see everyone starting to jump on board and get ready. As you know, you will just need tonight your balls, your throw balls, or if you've got anything else such as your tennis balls, you've got tennis balls. And you're going to need some kind of block or just a prop. It's really for, no doubt, for the head to rest on. And it can be any, or it could be any structure. Even if you don't have that and you have a bolster or you have some kind of pillow or something of the like. Where we're going to focus on tonight is the glutes and I guess the muscles that come up and support a little bit of the pelvis. So I'm sort of trying to work our way up from that foot. Last week we did, like say, foot, calf, and we did a little bit of glute as well. But it seems to be a bit of a notorious area where everyone says to me, if there's a part of the body that they would like to work on, it's usually the hips. What do I need to? Oh, I just thought I'd bring in people sort of say to me, where do I get, or where was my training? One of my trainings from the roll method. This is the manual I tend to, and I said to you the other week, like how thick it is. It's pretty thick, and it's also very worn. Pages are now falling out of it just for the general use of it. These are all my own notes that go with it. You can see all my little tags. So well and truly used. Jill Miller is probably one of the leading, I guess, physicians. When we talk about training people, training professionals in the area of releasing fascia, which is why we're doing our roll and release. Area, first of all, it's called the ITB. It stands for the iliotibial band. It runs down the lateral side of the leg, and as the name I guess infers, it's a band of sinewy fibers. It's not a muscle. Okay. And it literally runs from the hip down the side of the leg towards the lateral side of the knee. Okay. This is the sort of area that I often see people use their rollers for, up and down on their rollers, their ITB. Okay. It's very close to another area that we're going to work through, which is called the TFL, the fascia, the tibial band and the fascia latae. So the tensor fascia latae comes up. It's more what we call anterior, more here towards the front, and it runs down, and then it attaches to that ITB. Okay. So it's not that long. It's about here. Okay. And then it comes into that band and it continues to run down. So that's why I've decided to do the two together. Where do we start? Okay, so I've got Brett because like I did with bells last week, it's easier if I can show you on somebody else, and then I'll still try and do it as well with my other set of balls, but it's nice to be able to show you exactly where it is. So I'm going to get Brett to lie down on his side. So therefore this is the side that we're going to be working on, and because it really sort of, whilst it starts up here, it's probably most effective to start to run from, say, this mid part of the leg all the way down towards the knee. And the two balls are going to sit side by side here. So they're going to come, as I said, on this lateral side. So it's nowhere near the quad, okay? It's very much on that lateral side of the leg. Yeah, good. And then this underside knee gets to bend. Okay, good. We have a couple of options. If Brett wanted his head to go onto the block, he could lie down. And there's more load going into it when he either weights it down or he puts the two knees down on top of each other. Yep. So whichever way you feel, wherever you feel that the strongest amount of load is. Remember though, very much along that principle of, shall we say, like less is more. It's not about, is it so excruciating that I have to feel like I'm doing this, I'm pulling back. So I was doing some practice this afternoon on these areas myself, and I had to keep reminding myself, had to keep cueing myself, just soften into it. Just just relax into it, because it's so easy without even knowing. All of a sudden you start to pull out of it, you start to pull back. So I will continue to remind you can continue to remind yourself. But at this stage we're really working on, we talked about what kinds of techniques we can use. We're really working on compression, okay? Putting some weight down onto it. After compression, we have this sliding action, okay, where we can move from side to side across the muscle fibers. Okay, so muscle fibers will either run, obviously this way up and down, or they'll run across. So we can cross fiber, okay, because our muscle fibers are going to be running down this leg. We can cross fiber, we can go acrosswise to make some, I guess, dynamic changes to it. So you can keep going, okay, but remember, it's not about, like I said, in rollers, and I see it all the time, people jumping on rollers and literally going really quick and fast, rolling down. And as they're doing it, I can see the angst in their face and oh, this is so painful, I really hate doing it. This shouldn't feel like that, okay? It should feel like, I guess like you're having, a relatively strong massage, but not an excruciating massage where, there's tears rolling down your face. You can feel the therapist really getting into some of those spots. And the more that you relax in your massage, you start to feel the benefits of it. Okay, the more you hold yourself back in that massage, then the tighter that the muscles become, that, and the therapist is probably saying to you, just relax, just breathe into this now as I hold down, or I compress onto that muscle.
What about straightening the leg?
You can make some changes to the underside of the leg.
Intensifies it.
That was stronger for Brett. Okay. You can play around with this underside leg, because obviously as you're flexing and extending this leg, it's having effect, because obviously it attaches down here to the knee. So if we know where the point of insertion is, then when we play around with that, then it can have some effect. It could even have some effect if you sort of even did some kind of you might think, okay, if I was to lift the leg, does it put any load onto it? As I rotate the foot, does it make, he's going yes, does it make any difference? All of these movements are changing the angle of this ITB. Okay. Now we know that it travels a long way. So at this point in time, we're probably, 3/4 of the way down that thigh. We're needing to obviously make progress down to the further down this leg. So we'll just have to move the balls a little further down. Now, as we get further down, we might be touching on different spots. So we might think, oh gosh, it's really strong here. That's okay. It's not so strong. I know what is it that I have to do to change the dynamics of the effect of this movement. So maybe this time around, I have to weight it down, or I need to angle that underside leg a little bit differently. The thing about fascial release work and any kind of roll and release work, it's different for all of us, because of we're all very different, basically. And every day we wake up feeling very, very different. So I might get to here and go, there's nothing going on here. That's okay. So it doesn't matter if I go forward and back, side to side. Nothing really is going on. Okay, that's all right. Acknowledge that. Let's go down. Is there a spot a little further down that might be the real point where it's really holding on? Okay, where that fascia is really not releasing. It's all sort of bunched up and sort of meshed or knotted together. So we've got the side to side. Okay, yeah. We've got some angular changes with the leg or the foot. And I can see here, say with Brett, he's sort of slightly tilted back. So does it make any difference if you let the body sort of roll a little bit more forward over it?
It's harder.
It's harder, yeah. So for me, observing his body, I could see that it was pulling back. Okay, so it was rolling back to try and roll off the balls. So I just say, you know what? Would it make any difference if I rolled you a little more forward onto it? Yes. Very different?
It's sore.
It's sorer. Mm-hmm. So just, I guess, for a lot of you, I know you're doing meditation with me. This is almost a meditative practice. You are still, that's meditation. When you're still, you can listen and you can hear what's going on. And then in meditation, what do? We breathe. Okay. And we want to breathe through to soften, to let go. It really is all the practices and principles of meditation. Let's meander down a little bit further. So we do not go on the knee. We never roll and release on a joint, ever. Okay, it's always the fleshy stuff. Or in this case, we're talking about the band. But it's never on a bony, never on a bony structure. I often, and I know I mentioned it last week, that it's quite common that you might feel it at either of the points of where, in this instance, the band originates and inserts, because they're the two, anchor points of that band. And it might be that we need to make some changes accordingly, if it's quite strong there or if it's not. How's it for the?
Not strong.
Not
one above.
The
Really strong.
strong. What happens if you move your leg? Yeah.
Yeah.
Still no difference. What about
Actually,
you?
it's weaker.
Weaker if you roll over and to it more.
A little bit stronger.
Yeah. Remember that this does come from here. It's quite wide, yeah, and then it's still, it's not in the mid of the quad, but it's still on this. If I'm looking at my seam of my pants, it's probably still medial. Medial means middle. It's still medial of that, like it's not lateral of it. So it's still coming, say, down along through here, and it narrows. So it starts off quite wide, and then it narrows. As you can imagine, it's got to narrow as it gets to this point here. There's not a lot of joint structure for it to be on. Okay. So let's flip it to the other side, and we'll try and do the same kind of thing, those little 3 incremental stages as we go down on this. I'll move over here as we go down on this second side. So ITB, iliotibial band. Yeah. Okay. So again, remember, it's not here on my hip. Okay. We're starting down here on the flesh. Okay, on the fleshy part. And we know we've got 3 stages. And we have the 2 balls. The 2 balls are more effective than the one, definitely than the 1 ball. And again, I'm looking here to see that it's not on the flesh. And ideally, we've got, in this instance, these hips stacked. One hip is stacked above the other. So if Brett wanted to make this any stronger, rather than having the knees stacked, he could bend this leg and put the foot on it to weight it down. Stronger? Yeah. Okay. But you know where and what's right for you. So keep coming back. Am I breathing through it? Am I trying to hold my breath? Or am I allowing myself literally just to soften and sink into it? The other thing that can happen is we can sometimes start to create tension in other parts of the body. For example, am I trying to hold myself up here? So rather than worrying about what's going on down here in this leg, am I recreating more tension and stress somewhere else in my body? Okay, which, as we would know, starts to defeat the purpose. So again, we could lift the leg. We could even move that foot. So you can see that I have that option of being able to rotate the leg. Or we could move it, bending it, and straightening it.
That's
Strongest is out longer.
toe down.
Toe down.
Real high.
Yep.
Out low.
Yep. So this is what I love about the program, the rolling and releasing, is that you get the opportunity to explore different options. I will say, to be honest with you, there is no right or wrong. Okay. What is it? Can you feel it? So the whole idea is getting back into your body and allowing your body to tell you how it actually feels. Okay. So being body aware is really important. But again, without creating tension anywhere else. Yeah. So let's move down to, let's say, our second stage. So we've got 3. And on the first side, Brett said that was his strongest. That was where it felt most intense. Again, not to judge. Interesting to see whether or not that has similar effect on the sides. Also remember too, when you're working through sides, we always have and always will have a dominant side. Okay? A side that works perhaps more than the other. As a result, what can happen is that becomes more fatigued, more tired, becomes more overworked, because it may decide to be the lead side, the more dominant side. So I always like to start with compression. You know, that's just me, because I like to be in stillness first to gauge, you know, how does it feel. And then I can start to add movement if I wish. Stronger going side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The left side was way
Stronger, way more intense.
Way more intense, yeah.
So now going cross fibering, if you want to, running across the muscle fibers. As you can see, and probably as you can feel, these aren't big, grand movements. So for example, if we're on our roller, and we're rolling up and down, and they're what I call big movements. Okay, these are small, controlled movements, so that you can really sit into them and really feel them. Alrighty, let's maybe try that very last third point. Remember, not on the joint, very, very important. Still very lateral. So Brett's probably maybe 5 centimeters away from, yep, good. Better? Hurts then? Yeah. Okay. So again, it wasn't a lot, and there's this lovely saying. It is interesting because I was doing part of my pranayama teacher training today, and Judith Hanson-Lassiter, who I'm doing with, she says, and it's such a common phrase, there's that fine line between heaven and hell. And we need to find that line, yeah? So it's either like, oh, too cruisy, you know, or it's like, whew, OTT. Okay, so we want to be between the two, and we don't want to, I guess, go that far that, and I talk about it in yin, you know, we know where our edge is. That edge can change, as we know in yin. So we get into here and we're thinking, okay, this is really quite breathtaking. And as I sit in it for longer and I take time to be in it, it will let go. Okay. Just like as you breathe through tension in your body, it will start to soften. And therefore, then that gives you permission to find a new edge, okay, a new little boundary to work within, but never going beyond, okay, at that point knowing where it is.
It's at the edge.
Is that you're at the edge?
Oh, the whole way hasn't loosened off.
It hasn't?
No.
No. So it's a little bit like when we're talking, also in meditation, like surrendering. Like, you know what, just let go to it. And almost like, well, let's just see what happens if I don't keep resisting. What happens?
Pain is good.
The pain is good, maybe. And it's so easy to forget about the breath, okay? Because you're so consumed with the sensation that you often lose sight of your breathing. Okay? And I get that. Okay, totally get that. Alrighty. So let's get Brett to roll out of it, and I'll get you just to lie on your back just for a moment. And you get in a block or whatever you want under the head if it feels comfortable. Again, we call this that reset. Okay, Okay, the opportunity to sit in full stillness, just like we do Shavasana after we've done all that practice. Okay, we sit and we lie here just for a period of time to start to allow the body to absorb and to reboot itself, to re-nourish itself. It's only in that quietness and that stillness of the body that we give it permission, we give it the opportunity to reconfigure itself. Alrighty, so I'll get Brett to hop up in whatever way he feels comfortable, and I will definitely move us on. I will also give us another option, and I'll give it to us now because we may not have time in the next couple of weeks. You could do this kind of movement against a wall as well. So for example, if you think, you know what, I feel this area is really causing me some grief, some pain, blah, 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 blah. I might be at work, or I might be in a place where I can't really lie down on the floor with my knees like that and release this. But I could perhaps use the wall. Okay, so definitely this same action could be ball into those areas that we were working through down here on the wall. Okay. So you could actually use your own body weight and press into it. You could move it again a little bit more forward and back, again with that same idea, but it's another great way of, and I know I'm missing my head, but you've got the gist of what can happen. My outer leg is giving me some weight, it's pushing me into the wall, and the ball can also be doing the same action. There's always options, and some ways feel more comfortable or stronger definitely than others. Let's move from there, as I'm mindful of the time, to going into, let's go piriformis muscle. I'm going to get Brett to, so maybe just go here for us, and turn your back to the camera, because I'll show you where on the, and sit upright for me then. Yeah, awesome. Where these balls are going to go. So the piriformis muscle it's a really, really deep muscle. I talk to you all the time about it. It's the muscle that the sciatic nerve runs through. So I can see from here, this is like the rim of Brett's pelvis. So we don't want to be on the rim of the pelvis. It's almost like, so again, I'm showing you this so that you can see for yourself where the balls will go. They'll go either side here. Okay, so these two little points just here. So you can see that they're not on his bum cheeks, yeah? So, because he's sitting on them, okay? He's sitting on those on the ischial tuberosity. So these balls would go, say, here, either side of this is the sacrum, yeah? Okay, so they're going to go here. And when he lowers down, what it does is the piriformis muscle goes from the rim, or the lower rim of the pelvis, across towards the, I'll bore you, the greater trochanter, okay, part of the leg bone. So you can pop them underneath where I press them into, and lower all the way, yep, down towards the floor. So head down when you're ready. Okay. Yeah. All right. How's that? Okay. Definitely one of the things where we say you've got to sink yourself into it. I've been inclined to close my knees together and have my feet maybe a little wider. Okay. Yep. That'll open up sacrum, take any load out of the lower back. So I'm looking at Brett's head here and thinking it's probably tilted back a little bit too much for my liking. I would suggest that he just puts this underneath there. Feel better? Yeah, and I can you see how now his chin's not definitely poking up towards the roof, it's now a nice longer spine. Mm-hmm. The knees are together to stop the, as I said, so the knees together are in turn opening up the pelvis, the back of the pelvis, across the back of the sacrum. So we're taking any compression out of that SIJ joint. Same idea, we've got compression, so we've got load going down. Okay. Or we've got a very slow side to side action. How's that feel? Good. We could choose to take the legs the other way. So at the moment I've got the knees knocking in, Could we go the opposite way and go into butterfly? Does it feel any different when it goes, when now
A little bit stronger.
a little bit stronger now? Okay.
I often find I do like when I'm doing one ball, one leg like that,
With only just one ball,
which actually, yeah, can then actually push down.
the weight down that leg.
Yeah. As opposed to there's nothing being able to push down.
Down
That's
on.
your own
Yeah.
weight.
If we start here as a little introductory to the muscle, to remind the muscle that we're not here to go out hard, okay, for the muscle to, I guess, adapt. Okay, so we're, in a sense, sort of spoon feeding it and just saying just little bits at a time so that you get used to eventually the stronger version. Okay, and I will, because we'll definitely go stronger with it. Piriformis muscle is a stabilizing muscle. It stabilizes the pelvis. So what does that mean? It stops the pelvis from tipping forward and back, rotating, tilting. It's a very, 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 very important. It's a very important muscle. Okay, all stabilizing muscles are important. So from where you are here, you could allow yourself to float the left knee down towards the floor, so like a butterfly, yeah, okay, only. And then Brett could continue to perhaps roll, yep, that other knee in and put more weight on that left-hand side. Is it different with that way? Marginally, okay. If you were to change your right leg onto it a bit more, so could you weight it down? Would that make any difference? Oh, you've gone over to the other
I
side.
was just seeing what the difference is between each one. Yeah, that's stronger.
Okay, so weighting the leg down, because remember often I'll describe to us when we're in even things like cobblestones, the knees are a little bit like springy. They want to keep bouncing up on us. Okay. Sometimes they just need a subtle reminder to stay weighted down, and the weight of that leg can do that for you. When we were doing the ITB, we mucked around with that underside leg moving out and in. Does that make any difference as you move that leg out and in?
Yeah.
If you roll your weight a little more towards me, does that make any difference?
Getting stronger.
Getting stronger, yeah. We need then maybe a change of positioning for the head here. Now the head's on the block. So as we start to roll weight over and onto the piriformis, it gets stronger. Okay, you can, that would make a lot of sense if we were thinking this through logically. Okay, rolling more body weight onto it, putting more load down and into it. So again, keep reminding yourself of the importance of not pulling back and out of it, the importance of letting our weight, in a sense, we're trying to encourage, let's say, the muscle to sort of melt over the ball and, you know, almost form over the ball rather than pulling back off the ball. Again, take time to be in it and give yourself permission to explore.
This one you might get some referral.
You had some referring pain? Down the leg?
Down and up.
Down the leg?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that would be, for the very reason that I just said, that the sciatic nerve either runs through, can run through, it can run around. For all of us, it's very, very different. So the referred pain that Brett might be feeling down the leg is the sciatic nerve being compressed, as we are here, and giving you a sensation of perhaps like a tingly, thin line running down the leg. All right, ready to change the other side. So switch to the other side. Find the same spot but on the other glute. Oops, no, there's one behind. Yeah. Okay. Let's start off easy. Okay, let's not shock it, because if we shock it, then it's going to be in shock for a while, and we're going to have to ease really slowly into it.
Is that the right place for it?
So at this stage I can see that Brett's got most of his like upper trunk onto the floor, so there's not as much weight going into it just yet as per before. He could put, rather than the foot where he has it on the ankle, it could actually go on the leg. Does that feel okay?
It's
Much stronger?
My right side's much worse.
Much worse, okay. So right side, Brett's saying, is a little worse than the left. No doubt his dominant, definitely his dominant side.
Maybe I could go as far on the right side.
On the right side, can't go as far on the right side. Which is neither here nor there, not important. But it is always an interesting, all I'll say is it's an interesting observation, that's all it needs to be. And therefore, as an interesting observation, we respond accordingly. Okay, so for example, I don't expect myself or judge myself to go as far or to be the same on the two sides. Okay, so just breathing our way through and finding perhaps, you know, I will call it, I like to call it the sweet spot. It's that spot where you go, aren't they? Yeah, I can feel it. And if I'm not, and not to say that every time it has to be that sweet spot, but we do definitely need to start to feel that something is going on. And if it's not, that's okay. We'll just move a different part, move to a different point. Or I'll change the dynamics. Okay. Do I have to move the leg? Does that make a change to it? Do I need to maybe roll more weight over onto it? Does that change it? Okay, so very different stories on the two sides. Therefore, because we've got more tools in our tool bag, we can decide where and what angles we can play with. But again, always coming back to the breath. Okay, always thinking, okay, one, am I breathing slowly and smoothly and rhythmically? Am I holding off on this a little bit more than I should be? Am I sort of resisting it? Or am I allowing myself sort of to melt over and into it? Important.
It's amazing how you hold it and it just releases and just eases off so much. And then you can hold it. Just get used to it. So like that's like
Nowhere near as bad.
a third of
What it was?
Started it.
Yeah. Okay. And I was going to mention it last week, but again didn't want to overwhelm us with too much information. What will happen in those people who are regulars that do this kind of roll and release technique, what you will notice is the more you do it, the more responsive your body will become. Okay. So for example, you might have felt that the first time that you were doing it, that it took 15 minutes before it started to let go. You do it, and 2 weeks later, and you keep sticking with it, and that becomes a 5-minute release. Because last week I talked about the fact that fascia, just like muscle, has memory. Okay, and it will recall where it was, and it will come back to that, and it will respond much quicker. Because it knows exactly what it's to do. Therapists will find that with touch, because often myofascial work is done with a simple touch, and just that simple touch on that muscle, the acknowledgement of it, it goes, okay, I know what I'm meant to do. That touch is telling me I need to release it, because it's been taught over a series of time to do that. Ready to come out? Yep. Have a little rest, relax, and a recharge here. So just a couple of minutes here just to settle it out. One pose that can be quite useful to see, and I didn't start us off with it, but to see how we've progressed, because sometimes it's nice to know, did I make any progress with all of this? Can be that double pigeon. You know how tight that double pigeon can be? Or any of those, even head of the cow. So ITB and piriformis. I'm going to move on to a muscle called the glute med, and we need the two balls for that. Get Brett to come and sit back up, and I'll show you where that is. It's it's this lateral one, it's the side one. So you can go on to the side. There's three glute muscles, the biggest of them being glute max, gluteus maximus. Then there goes glute med, and then glute min. Okay, and they sort of all layer over each other. So the biggest muscle, the superficial muscle, glute max, goes pretty much from this lateral side into the sacrum, and glute med is a little smaller underneath it. It's about, so it's very lateral. It's about, say, here. I know it's not always easy to describe. If I was to say it's the line where say if you were to have like a low line, like a top, just it comes across your the top of your trouser. It's about here. Okay. So down the side, and it's about here. Okay. So if Brett lies down, you'll be back on your side again, and you might need your little block pillow. How's that feel? Stack your hips around on top of each other. Or is it too strong?
No, it's actually better backwards.
Better backwards, okay.
Let's stick with one ball.
More weights on one ball than the other.
Yeah.
So the idea of this is that it releases the one of the deeper glute muscles, because obviously all of our, say our little ankle and knee, Brett was saying he doesn't mind doing that kind of stretch before, is very much the superficially glute max. It's often hard to get to you can see that there's another muscle behind that, then there's another muscle behind that. Okay, so trying to stretch all of those layers of muscle is not that easy. That's why compression, such as fascial release through the balls, can sort of drop down into those deeper layers. How does that feel? Stronger? Okay. Again, I find with this one, compression is probably one of the better ones, but even just a little roll. Yeah. Sometimes it's even a matter of just also repositioning the ball, because it lower. Yeah? Got it now? Yes. Okay. The idea, the Judith Hanson Lassiter, the difference between heaven and hell, okay, it can be minuscule. So Brett just moved that ball maybe 2 mils. Okay, a little further towards me. You moved it? Yep. And that made that massive difference. Twice as strong. Okay. So give yourself the permission to play around with it and not feel like, I'm not sure. If you're not sure, you're not sure. It's pretty simple. If you're not sure that you can feel it, then you're obviously not in the right, not in the right spot, and that's okay.
So why are we using 2 balls instead of one for these?
Because of the size of the muscle. How's it feel? Is it releasing? Yeah. Okay. Because it's quite I guess a bigger kind of muscle compared to the bands, then it can release a little more quicker, I find. And then when it's released a little bit more, then we can load into it maybe a little bit more.
Keep going?
Yeah, if you can. Is it making a difference with the change of positioning of that underside leg if you move that underside?
For me, this was just not doing anything. So leaning back sort of helped. And then when I opened up the foot and actually pushed down on the foot, it somehow made this...
Anchored you down a little bit more into it.
Anchored it down more as opposed to...
wanting to flip up.
Flipping up.
Yep.
So it was a good stretch, but it's eased off
quite a lot.
Yeah, so.
I find the glute muscles ease off pretty quickly. It's because they're pretty big muscles. And, you know, I guess we do stretch them a bit so they are semi-responsive. Any difference there? Now you're rolling a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like at the front of it. But for me, the back one is way
better.
Stronger.
If you propped up on your elbow, does it make any difference?
What?
Sometimes.
Well, it just means I can push down more.
Yes.
But for me, that
and if you roll your leg back and you roll back into it a bit more?
Yeah, the roll back for me is
big.
Yeah, like propped up like this, and like this is even stronger than before.
Sometimes coming up, that's why I said, does it make any difference? Sometimes coming up onto the elbow gives you more shear force down into it, so it can be a little bit stronger through that. For some people, they're like, no, it doesn't make any difference. That's okay. But it's nice to know that you can play around with different options, particularly if you're not feeling like you're going to overload into that shoulder. Some people might say, you know what, it's just way too strong on my shoulder. It's better for me not to. You've had enough. I've had enough now. All right, on to the other side. So that was your not so good side, your right side. Okay.
So how are we doing this?
So again, remember shirt line? Yep. So pretty much, I know Brett's got a longer shirt, but if I look at where the top of his pants are, it's down here a little bit more. So you're a little bit too low, I think. Yeah, I think you need to be here. Yep. Do you want your block? Yeah.
So this one, the forward roll is where it's stronger.
And it wasn't like that on that first side?
No, the back roll was stronger.
Stronger, yeah. So that's where it's really, I guess, beneficial in knowing that it's not a replica on the two sides. So just because I did the leg out and in on one side doesn't necessarily mean it's what happens on the other side. And again, the importance of the whole idea of just listening to the body and going, okay, I know where I'm working. How does it feel if I lean back? Nothing. That's okay. Let me go back over and put more weight on it. How does it go if I open and close the leg? But if I was sitting here and still feeling that there was room to move on it, I would stay there until I could feel this sensation of actually pulling out of it, that I was actually, the muscles were definitely releasing from it.
So again, because it's in the forward rotation, that for me was much stronger on my right side, but on this one, the knee down, pushing the knee actually down to the ground as opposed to the foot down to the ground is giving it a much stronger
response.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so just because what worked on one side, you say, oh, it was so much stronger on that side doing that, and on this side it's like, no. But again, as I said before, just to know that you've got all these little tools in your toolbox, you can just pull out whichever one's going to work on that particular side and give you the best outcome. I can see just from my angle that Brett's still slightly tipping back here. Okay. Any difference? Yeah. Getting stronger. And because you can't always, because you can never really see yourself unless you had some kind of mirror structure. It's very hard to know. And I know I know you'll say that to me even in class. Like, I don't know whether or not my down dog, I'm got this stacked, or whether or not my shoulders are plugged into my shoulder sockets properly, because I can't really see myself. It is really hard, but that's where we, I guess, the beauty of being mindful about our bodies and listening and trying to get a gauge of where we are. Not to say that it's perfectly right, but it's often hard, and I can appreciate that. It's hard to work out whether or not we are stacked or aligned, or am I rolling back? I don't feel like I am. Someone will say to you, do you know that you're leaning a little bit more to the left? No, that feels pretty normal to me. So Brett's doing like a little shearing act here where he feels that if he just gives it a little bit of a rollover. And sometimes when we do that, you almost get a bit of a flicking kind of sensation. I know Bella talked about that last week when we were doing some of the calf work. I feel like she was flicking over the muscles. It's often because the muscles are being held quite tightly by that fascia that they're not really letting go. As we try to roll over them, they flick around a bit. Settled?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's roll back off and just do a little reset. Do a little 2 or 3 minute, 2 minute reset. There's often a few little aha moments when you get into that reset. You think, oh, gee, it's really, I really feel perhaps that maybe across the back of the pelvis and the bum feels like it's can sort of spread out across the mat a little bit more. It's not so holding on for grim death. It feels as though it's more spacious across the mat, as opposed to trying to either pull off the mat or resist being into the mat. And the last one that I'm trying to keep in unison with this whole sort of hip area is that muscle, or it is a muscle. It's called the tensor fasciae latae, the TFL. Okay, the one that I said was came down, started up through here, so it is definitely more anterior. Okay, this is anterior. The front of the body's anterior. Bum, posterior. Okay. So it's a little bit more anterior. It starts sort of more over through here, and then it started to attach into the ITB, and then it becomes part of the ITB. So if I get Brett to come over, you'll only need one. I think you only need one ball for this. Yep. The ball's going to be a little bit more. Put this down to here. It's going to be a little bit more hip and through this front part here. Let's start, I reckon, around about there maybe. Okay. Right on that, yeah. This usually brings tears to me, and it really starts to take my breath away. Is it hurt? Does it hurt you?
It's okay.
It's okay. This is right down the middle of my hip. This is more anterior. Okay. So it's coming more into the centre, more towards my midline. Okay. So the ball's not near my butt cheeks. Okay. It's not on that. If I had a seam down my trousers, it's not on that side seam. It's rolled in towards my thigh a little more. Okay. And it's up and it's up high. Like I can even right there now, I can get into it and like it can almost be breathtaking for me.
Okay, you should do this.
I did this afternoon.
So where it is that
Oh, like even just there, that's really sore. Like I reckon, could you go a little bit more to the front? Where is it? Where's the ball now? I reckon you can just go. Can you go like a little bit more?
like where I had it is where it's sore.
The sore? Okay.
But it's not.
That
Take my
bad.
breath away.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be.
Sometimes it can be, yeah. Stay where you are on this anterior side, and again keep, because like all of it, as you start to roll and you put more weight over it and onto it, stronger? No, okay.
Actually rolls off it.
You roll off it. In talking the fact that you're now lying onto the floor, there's no reason why you can't also do this sitting. So for example, I could put this ball there where I'm talking about, and I could actually, if I was sitting in the chair and I was watching telly, I could literally just use my weight and push it through here. We call it ploughing, where we actually roll over the muscle. Do you want to try that and see if you guys want to try it with us? You're most welcome to. If you think, you know what, I'm not getting that. Okay. So you could think, okay, yeah. Here's this. Imagine the seam line of my trousers, okay, and it's more towards the thigh. Can you feel that?
Hmm.
Is it different?
Not as strong as.
Not as strong, okay. So if it's not as strong, that's okay.
But I was more around here.
Yeah, oh, you can go up there, right there, see there?
Undo nothing.
Nothing doing. That for me is really quite strong. See that little spot there?
Strong.
Can you go and lie down on that a little bit more then?
What,
see?
this front one?
Yes, please. We also have this technique of, I'm just trying to remember what we call it. The ploughing is where we roll over it. It's like a shearing kind of effect where, actually it's called a spin and pivot. So you press it in and it's like you're turning the doorknob. You can press into this area. You can't do it when you're lying because you've got to be sitting, but you press in and then you turn the knob. And then you can press in and turn the knob. Like I know I can feel it like here. Remember I also talked about your wall. So I could find that same spot. So I'm just giving you options and you know what? Not doing it for me. Could you do this up against your wall even? And find it stronger on that side? Yeah. And with this, I'm just having a little play with my leg and I'm pulling that knee up and in. And when I bring it to there, that's a real different story. Okay, real different story.
Chalk and cheese on my side.
Is that?
Yeah. Right one's like delicate.
Delicate, yeah.
Left one was not really.
So if we think about where all of these muscles attach to, they all attach to the pelvis. And literally this pelvis, yes, the spine is pretty much the powerhouse of the skeletal structure because it houses the nervous system. But the pelvis, if that becomes disrupted, and what we mean by that is that if it's not in its neutral position, if it's altered in any, and we're not talking, it's tilting to the left 5 centimeters. We're talking, 0.1, millimeter, because the body is made so precisely. You can be out by the smallest amount, and it can play havoc on the rest of your body. So you'll start to feel it as it ease off. I can find for me, definitely had started to ease off. You think about when we sit all the time, these muscles are constantly in motion, constantly being activated, and then we get up and then they get released, and then we go back and we sit back down and they get contracted again. And we get up and we start to release. How's that feel?
Very, very sore.
Very sore. Wow. Yet the other side?
Dull.
Dull. Very dull. So dull. Really sore. Yeah. Okay. Which is fine because it's probably telling us. So what does it tell us in the whole scheme of things? That maybe I have to spend more time on that one side than the other side, okay, to release it. Shall we have just a little lie down or reset just to allow that side to reconfigure itself? Now we do an hour of roll and release, and I totally appreciate that we don't all have the beauty of 1 hour to dedicate to any kind of practice. It's not always possible. So I always would suggest to not necessarily have to do so many areas within, say, that pelvis. One area that you feel needs more attention than the other, definitely do it. I know after I did a bit of a play around this afternoon that, because I guess very much like many of you, you become so familiar with your body. During the afternoon, little parts of my body was talking to me, saying to me, could you please release this area here? Because it was all holding up. My body could sense there was another part in those glutes that I hadn't really addressed because I was just mucking around. I really wasn't giving myself the whole hour. And I was doing more on one side than I was on the other. and my body quite quickly told me that it wanted me to finish off the other side because it was feeling like it had been left out, perhaps. It was being neglected. Give yourself the time just to reset. So we've pretty much from here done from hips down. I think I'll probably, does it feel any different? Sitting? Yeah. So if you come back up and you do sit, you might notice a difference. I was, I guess, remiss in probably giving us a benchmark to start off with, but you could always do that yourself. So thinking, what, does this whole roll and release thing actually work? You could sit there like Brett's saying, cross-legged, or you could try head of the cow, or you could try double pigeon and go, oh, here I am now. No judgment, just a bit of a gauge, a benchmark. All right, I'm going to go do my releasing. Does it make any difference whatsoever? And I'll probably guarantee you that it does make a world of difference. Next week we're going to start to get more into the lower part of the back, and we'll run up the erectus spinae, the back muscles. We'll get into the mid back, the rhomboids, and we'll run across the back of the scapula, like all those really what we call the rotator cuff. Most people know all about those rotator cuff muscles. They impinge shoulders and things like that and affect ranges of movement. So one of the tests we could do could that be was how do these arms float up and how do they feel when they float up versus not doing that. So that will be next week. And then we finally progress to things like jaws and the occipital bones, which are all headachy related kind of things. And then if you've got any other questions and you think, you know what, Lisa, I'd love to know more about, how do I release this area or any other particular areas, then just drop me a little comment into the comment boxes and we'll look at other options for us. So that is us for tonight. Go and enjoy your Wednesday evening and practice and see how the body responds. And ideally with a little bit of practice, it will reduce your time in doing it. So that 1 hour, won't be 1 hour, your half an hour might end up as being a short 10-15 minutes. So take care. See you all next week. What are we on? Tomorrow's Thursday. No yoga. You have a day of rest tomorrow. So maybe you can go back and check out some of the post videos that you haven't seen. And then I will see Friday morning we have meditation, 7 a.m. and we have 9:30 yoga. So signing off for now. And thanks for, we might see if we can get Bells back next week if she's not working.